The last class we created was called import data, and I called it a factory class. That kind of implies that it has a job to do, and indeed it does. And what it does is it gives us a data table back by going to a file that has text in it that it separates out and gives us the data, the columns of data that are in that text file, in what's called a data table. When we get it back into the application, we'll be able to use that data table to parse out the data that we need. So the next class we're going to create is not going to be a factory class, because you see this factory class has only one method member, and no data members. The next one's kind of the opposite. It's going to be just data members and no method members. So let's get on with it. It's going to be called user. So let's create our class. Remember, we've got solution and then project. It's probably a good time to mention that one solution might have many projects, and that's actually a very good way to split a particular solution up, is that projects have a job and so forth. So we're going to add a class, and we're going to call it user. Now, when we're naming classes, the ideal thing to do is to make sure that they're singular. We wouldn't say users. We'd say user, because we think of it as one item. This is one item, and it's just that entity idea that we're just thinking about one thing that we're representing, and that's a single user. And additionally, what will happen is that when our software is built to work with lists of users, it will automatically rename the things it handles as users, so that it says this is a list, this is a collection. So it gets a bit confusing if you don't design that factoring in right at the beginning. So I'm just going to say add, and it'll be very quick. So the first thing we always do in our applications here, because this is all going to be needed to be used all over the place, so public class user. And of course, being good boys and girls, we always do this. We put our commentary at the top, and we're going to call this user. So this is to handle the data. Handle data for the users. So let's just save that, and we've got our class there. And what we'll now do is we'll start to build this class up so that we can manage the data things that we need to store about a user. So what data do we have about a user? We have two fields. We have a username and a password. Now, in each of these cases, both of them are strings, but they could easily be all sorts of different data types that we could have that we want to try and work with. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a class that represents fields for both of these types of things that we hold in our database, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be handling the data we get from the database. So we need to set up what are called properties, and we'll do that next. So we're going to use some of the shortcuts that you can get inside Visual Studio, but first I'm going to just do that as a comment. I'm going to be the username property. That's just a comment. And then what we will do is we'll use one of those shortcuts, and it demonstrates encapsulation. So we'll do prop full, and what it does is it gives us a skeleton. So let's do string. I'm going to call it username, and I'll go through the conventions in a minute. String, and it's going to be user name, and that's our first field created. So there we are. Now let's just talk it through. We have a class that we want to refer to as username. Now we're using the same title as we've got we've got a field, that we want to refer to as username. And that's exactly as it is in the database. And commonly you'll do this, but some people would advocate that you put underscores in front, and all sorts of things that you might do in order to define what's the property, what's the field name in the database, all those sorts of things you might want to separate as different types of information. But in this case, it's really not worth doing that. And we're going to have the password property. And once again, that's going to be a string. So we do prop full, and it gives us the skeleton. So string, and then the private member, which is this one, is lowercase, so it would be camel case. And the next one is Pascal case. So we've created both of our fields. Now let's just see what's happening here. This is a private member. It's for use only inside this class. It might be used for manipulation. It might be used for putting everything into uppercase or something that you might want to do with username. And then I've got twice username password of mine. It's a stupid boy Pike. That's better. So yes, so the public ones that are going to be used by any class that wants to address this class are here. And we have get and set. Now get is get the value that it currently holds, and set is change the value it currently holds to whatever you give it. Exactly the same for password. Now, we will never be setting. We'll only be getting, and it would be perfectly feasible to take those out, those sets, because we don't change the data in the database. We only get it from the database. And it's absolutely legal to take a set out. But I want to leave it here because it gives you the full illustration of the structure that's created by our scaffolding tools. If I wanted another one, which was going to be just a public method that nothing would ever have to be protected, I can just do prop. You may remember this. And we're going to say that it's an int. And we're going to call it age. And that just sets it up like that. So the prop is public. We can't protect anything that it does, but this isn't needed. I just wanted to show you what we do. If you do prop, you get a fully public method, or sorry, property. And if you do prop full, you can start to use the encapsulation. This field here is encapsulated as a private string that cannot be got at by any other piece of code outside of this class. So the last thing to do is to save and build and make sure that everything is still working okay, that we haven't broken anything, which is actually quite easy to do if you're not being very careful. First time around, build succeeded. So that's good. So the next thing we'll do is we'll do another class which is going to be working with the data that we now have from our database, which we did with the import data, and put into users. So that's what we'll do next.